بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. فأما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Recite the salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of your great deeds and amal, especially your commemoration and mourning for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, and may He write every single one of our names among the true mourners of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein by reciting aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And inshallah your second salawat in the honor of all of the marhumin and marhumat, your beloved ones, so that inshallah Allah will include them within the sawab of the majalis of Husseini by reciting your second of salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And let us save our energy, and inshallah with our full heart and the most sincere of intention, we can recite our third and loudest of salawat in the honor of Imam of Time, Hazrat Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman, Ajjalallah ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We're thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this blessing and bounty and one of a kind tawfiq to be able to gather around, sit around and join the majlis with the beautiful name of the Ahlul Bayt, especially Abu Abdullah al-Hussein during the month of Muharram. So we started having a series of discussion on the principles which will lead to the lifestyle of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, or as we refer to, Husseini lifestyle. Meaning, as the 10 days of Muharram passes by, not to only participate in a majlis as an audience, as a speaker, as a volunteer, as a sponsor, or as a simple person who just participate in a majlis, and once the 10 days goes by, I'll just go back to my normal way of living. So a year goes by, a year goes by, year after year, and nothing changes. The whole purpose of this discussion was to learn something that those ashab and the companions of Imam al-Hussein were able to apply and reflect based on, and made them the one-of-a-kind, unique ashab of all of the time. To the point that the Imam al-Ma'asum, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, praises them and refers to them as the one-of-a-kind companions of all times. So that status is up for grab. Yes, they are the first one who clinched it, but that doesn't mean that me and you, we can see ourselves far away from it. Rather, it is, again, a pathway for every single one of us to, number one, realize and acknowledge what will be the objective, and number two, how, inshallah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should be able to take steps towards that objective. So we started with principle number one, which was to have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And principle number two was to have faith in resurrection. The principle number three was to believe in the topic of velayat. As I go in order in list, it may sound simple. It's like, Shaykh, you're just telling us the usul ad-din, the principles of religion. Well, the base of the argument was the famous sermon of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. In that one, when Imam is talking to people, these are the very first three things that he mentions, right? He says that indeed the purpose of creation is nothing except for people to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَيَعْرَفُوا. Once they get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَعَبَدُوهُ, they start to worship Him. Then by worshiping Him, they become independent of worshiping anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At that moment, one person stands up and asks the question that says, Ya ibn Rasulallah, ma ma'arifatullah azza wa jal. This acknowledgement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you're constantly referring about, what is it? Is it something that can be found in the books, basically? Imam says, ma'arifatu ahli kulli zaman, imamahu alladhi yajibu alayhim ta'atuh. This ma'arifatullah, which Imam is referring to, is indeed acknowledging who is the Imam, number one. Number two, which is more important, yajibu alayhim ta'atuh. It becomes obligatory to obey and follow that Imam. If the Imam is not to be followed, then the title of Imamad will not be true about the Imam, right? Imam means leader. A leader who doesn't have any follower would not be called the Imam, right? So this topic of Vilayat became the third principle. The fourth principle lied within the very same last condition in which Imam al-Hussein mentioned in this sermon, which was يَجِبُ عَلَيْهِمْ طَاعَتُهُ. Indeed, they have to follow, they have to practice, they have to put to action what they hear from the Imam, not to only participate in the majalis, not to only read the ahadith, not to only recite the Quran, but rather take whatever we know and apply it in our life. And by applying so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reveal what we do not know. That's the way it works. Not to just go like majlis after majlis after majlis after majlis, right? And at the end of the Muharram, again, we'll be the very same person that we started the month of Muharram. Remember the intention on the first night? We decided all together that inshallah these 10 days will make changes. Not only changes in our actions, but inshallah changes in the way that we think, changes in the way that we see, changes in the way that we have, or changes on our perspectives that we have towards life, changes in the way that we feel the surroundings about us. All of this is possible within this very, short 10 days of Muharram. And that's why I refer to it as a unique opportunity and tawfiq for all of us. Within 10 days, we are more specific, within 2 or 3 days as we get closer and closer to the day of Ashura, it becomes that turning point. That once it hits, inshallah, once it gets lightened up, then it changes the lives of people. I'm sure many have heard of the stories of those who get changed during these 10 days of Muharram. So many have changed their side after 1200, 1300, 1100. In recent days and recent years, we've seen people around ourselves. Actually, one of the famous stories is one of the family members. He goes and he complains to one of the great ulama of his time. He says, I have this brother. My brother is a very sinful person. No matter what we do, we cannot fix him. We keep on taking him to this lecture, to that lecture, to see this alim, to see that alim. We take him to different, for example, people who have, influensive, way of speaking, but nothing works. We do du'as, nothing works. We pay sadaqat, nothing works. We have majlis on his name, nothing. He is constantly a sinful person. What can we do? That alim turns around and tells them, do one thing and report the result to me. What I'm telling you, if this was positive about him, then bring him to me. I may be able to persuade him otherwise. If that doesn't work, there is absolutely nothing me or anybody like me can do for him. What is that one thing? He says, you go with him, too, alone. You take a trip all the way to the land of Karbala. You go to the shrine of Imam al-Hussein, and there, as you enter the shrine of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, you sit back and just watch what he does when he gets close to the Dharih of Abu Abdullah. Do this and report back to me. If he starts to cry once he sees the Dharih of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, that means he still has a chance. Then you can bring him to me. If he doesn't cry, there's absolutely nothing that I can do. The brother gets very happy, very excited. So, okay, trip to Karbala, no problem. He puts everything on the side, cancels the works, the family, everything on the side, takes the brother, goes towards the land of Karbala. He says, as we entered the shrine of Imam al-Hussein. Before entering, my brother was just making a big deal out of this journey, constantly making jokes, trying to make uncomfortable for everybody. The minute we walked inside of the holy Sahm, the courtyard of the Abu Abdullah al-Hussein from Bab al-Qibla, all of a sudden he became quiet. I hadn't told him about the reason that I'm taking him, but I was keeping a close eye on him. The minute we entered the main courtyard, he became quiet. So I became even more focused on him. He didn't talk at all. We start walking step by step from Bab al-Qibla. We entered the room in which has the zarih of Imam al-Hussein. Those who have gone, they know. The first time you lay your eyes on those beautiful zarih of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, you cannot move your eyes away from the zarih. It is something that, mashallah, I'm sure everybody acknowledges. Once you lay your hands on that beautiful zarih, you don't want to let go. He says, I was constantly looking at my brother up to see what would be his reaction. I noticed that he just became a completely different person. He started breaking out to tears like I had never seen him before in my life. Non-stop, his shoulders were shaking. He was crying. He couldn't speak. He had become speechless, and he was just walking towards the zarih of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. I gave him some time, a couple of minutes, maybe half an hour. He wouldn't stop. After about an hour, he calmed down a little bit, so I tapped on his shoulder. I'm like, shall we go back? He's like, where should I go? I have finally found the missing item of my life. Where should I go? So I came back alone, and my brother, no, he was left there in Karbala. The whole life changed in one incident, right? That's the beauty that all of us have during the month of Muharram as we get close and close and close to the day of Ashura. So just a reminder, if you're working on the day of Ashura and Tasu'ah, make sure you take those 2 days off. From hadith aspect, it is makruh, right? So from the akhlaqi aspect, it's highly recommended not to do any even daily chores on those 2 days, especially on the day of Ashura. Perhaps one reason for it is this fact, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is opening the pathway for all of his unique blessings on one day. Then again, me and you, we may neglect about it and go about just collecting more of the dunyavi, the material stuff, just as everybody else has done before us, right? As the beautiful verses which the brother recited, mashallah, very beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly provides, imma shakiran aw imma kafura. Whether we will be thankful or not, he provides, right? He is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the Almighty. He is the Creator, constantly providing for us. But it becomes upon me and you to choose in which direction we want to receive the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which brings the fifth principle, in which it talks about having this tawakkul, having this reliance, having this dependency, if you want to translate towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the topic of tawakkul may actually sound very easy. It's like, okay, Shaykh, we know about this, everything we do. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ الشَّيْء, right? فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. When at the minute we want to do something, we say tawakkaltu ala Allah. I rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's the very minimum, bare, layman terminology of tawakkul. Actually, if you dissect it, it probably ends up in a form of not doing a tawakkul at all. So let me explain it a little bit more. When it comes to a definition of tawakkul, the ulama, they say it has two parts. Number one, tawakkul must be done on every single act and deed. I underline every single deed or act or thing. Not only parts, not only when something becomes difficult, not only when we find ourselves cornered with a lot of problems, not only, for example, when I have not studied for the test next day, I do a tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No. Even for the simplest thing that we do out of habit, that's the meaning of tawakkul, right? It's not limited to specific deeds. Even for the breathing that we do, even for the blinking of an eye that we do, right? All of the stuff that we do voluntarily, right? The simple stuff such as putting a food in our mouth and chewing it. Chewing a food, even chewing a food needs a tawakkul. That's the first part. So every single thing we do needs a tawakkul. Number two, the tawakkul should be on something or someone. This something or someone has to be only one person. Nobody else, nothing else. That one person is who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So literally every single thing we do, the reliance has to be on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and nothing else. That's why it makes it a little bit difficult. Because what we are used to, at least people who are like me, we do our lives, like we plan for everything. We use all of the technology, the tools, the circle of friends, the networking that we have, the status that we have. We use the money within our power, right? All the connections that we have. We plan for our life. And we plan for that perfect sense of life. Alhamdulillah, everything is paid off. I have that passive income. I'm aiming for that perfect retirement. The college fund for the kids is paid off. Everything is set up in that order. So where is the tawakkul within this picture? Right? That's the missing item. And that's a reason that a lot of times the calamities, as we say, the bala and ibtila happens in our life. Because mu'min and tawakkul, they go hand in hand. The higher level of faith, the more vast this definition of tawakkul becomes in a person's life. The phrase, the zikr, in which Imam al-Hussein constantly were reciting on the day of Ashura from early morning all the way to the very last second of his beautiful life was La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. La hawla wa la quwwa. This is what we say is an infinite form. Nothing, absolutely nothing, no possible thing of energy becoming a material becoming, no changes whatsoever can happen except by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Constantly Imam is saying this. And imagine, in the middle of the battle, in the middle of all of the masa'ib, in the middle of losing all of the loved ones, Imam keeps on reciting and reciting and reciting the very same dhikr. What does it indicate? The highest level of iman that you can possibly imagine. Because it's very hard. If you want to practice it, let's say if we participate in a competition, in a soccer match, in a cricket match, in a, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, whatever you like, right? The minute they blow the whistle to start the game, everything goes out of the mind. Tawakkul, tawassul, shafa'a, everything goes. The only thing we think, how to score, how to win, for example. We rely on our expertise. We rely on our skills. We rely on our team if you're a team player, right? We rely on whatever we are best at. Everything goes out of our mind. Or no, even in a very simple gathering, the minute we start socializing, everything goes away. But a mu'min or a mu'minah, despite of what situation they're in, they still have this topic of tawakkul on the background. They don't see themselves something independent to say, okay, alhamdulillah, Allah has given me this power to speak, so therefore I'm using the blessing of Allah subhanahu. It's not something that Allah gives to us and He stands back and watches, right? That's why we say Allah is not only to say creator, because creator creates. No, but the creator who's khallaq, constantly creating, right? Constantly providing, constantly making a formation. That's the definition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning that everything we see is not like an independent pieces. Okay, I'm one thing, you're one thing, he's one thing, he's third thing, right? No, it's constant providing or provision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every second that goes by. But because we're used to the material form, we see it in a constant matter of existence. So they give an example. They say every time you want to refer to something in this dunya, what do we use? We use time and place. In such and such place, in such and such time. This event happened, right? That's what we're used to. Now they give the example. They say, okay, now remove the time and place from the example you provide. What happens to that event? Does it vanish or is it still there? You just remove the attributes of time and place to it. And that's why we did have it's a very lengthy discussion. I don't want to bore you guys with it. But technically speaking, the time that we know, the time that we go by the Greenwich time, in reality does not exist. In Islamic philosophy, they talk about. They say the timing, the actual timing, it differs from one person to another, meaning each one of us has their own unique sense of timing. That's why the life that we have is different. The speed of growth or falling down is different. One may go fast, one may go slow, one may change in one night, one may change after 40 years, right? So the timing that we have is different. The velocity of it is different. Why? Because the timing makes sense when there is a movement. Movement doesn't mean physical movement. Movement means a perfection in terms of spirituality. When we gain that sense of kamal, for example, when you gain a kamal, that becomes a movement for us. That becomes one stage of time for us, right? So when we go back to our topic, the fifth principle, the tawakkul. What is tawakkul is telling us? It's telling us to, in every single moment of our life, do not see ourselves in charge of whatever actions that we are doing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that, okay, give up the topic of freedom. No. We have all the freedom, the free choice. I mean, you can make a right or you can make a left turn, right? You can go straight, you can go backward, right? You have to make that choice. But the very choice that we make falls within this topic of tawakkul. How? Very simple example. The water, what do we know about the water? We know that every time somebody drinks the water quenches their thirst. Now, when it comes to the realm of Tawheed, when it talks about the monotheism, the very same water somebody can drink and drink and drink, yet again, becomes more thirsty. To the point that the very same water will kill the person out of the thirst. How is that possible? Is that only a miracle that happened to one of the enemies of Imam al-Hussein when Imam made the prayer for him, right? He constantly was drinking water and he finally died out of thirst. The water was not quenching his thirst. Versus other ahadith in which it talks about the ashab who was lost in the middle of desert. He makes a prayer to Imam of Time. The Imam of Time reveals to him and he gives him a piece of wood. He puts that piece of wood underneath his tongue and the piece of wood quenches his thirst. A piece of wood quenches the thirst. The very same water, the H2O that we are familiar with, does not quench the thirst. How does that work? If it's only a physical laws that we are familiar with, how would you explain this one? So miracle has no explanation, is an exception, or no miracle falls within a ruling that we are not aware of, right? That indicates the topic of tawakkul. Meaning even in the simplest things, such as drinking water, drinking that chai, drinking that tea, right? As you drink it, have the tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The very same sensation of joy, of drinking, of eating, of food, of socializing, of attending the majlis, right? Sitting in the majlis, going from one foot to another foot, making ourselves comfortable within the majlis. Every single thing. Why? The whole purpose is to constantly keep alive this thought or believe in it that we are at the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not somewhere hidden. It's not something that's going to come to us later on. Usually we may think this way. I will do good deeds, inshallah, once I pass away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me rewards afterwards. That's, again, a kindergarten way of thinking, right? It's happening all at the moment. It's instant result. We may not feel it, we may not see it, but it's instant result, right? We may do something bad. The very same sinful act has an instant punishment for us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extend, the punishment being, like us feeling the punishment due to His mercy. That's a different topic. But the results of the action, as we say, is instant. The alam barzakh is right now. It's not something to come. It's not something to be created later on. It's happening at the moment that we are talking. Examples, so many cases when imams, they show the barzakh to some of the ashab, right? Different examples. One of them happens on the night of Ashura. When Imam al-Hussein does what? He removes the veils from the eyes of the ashab. Only the ones who remained, right? Just one simple example. That means what? It's happening right now as we're sitting here. Where is our soul? Where is it journeying? To which people or which level is it flying, if you want to say? Allahu A'lam, right? The heaven and hell that we talk about is not something to come. No, it's already there. A very famous true story from the time of Nabi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam wa ali Muhammad, in which after the morning prayer, as the morning prayer finishes and everybody starts to head out the masjid, Nabi Rasulullah turns around and he spots this young youth at the corner of the masjid. Interesting, face this young youth has. His skin was all pale. His eyes was all blackened due to lack of sleep, and he was constantly nodding, trying to sleep a little bit. Nabi Rasulullah approaches him and says, Salam, says, Alaikum Salam. It's like, Kayfa asbahta? How's your day been? What are you up to? In what status are you, what's going on? He looks down, then he looks up again, and he says, Oh Nabi Rasulullah, if you allow me, I can tell you among the people who are at this masjid, who is burning in hell and who is in heaven. A young man. Nabi Rasulullah tells him, this is a big claim to tell who is in heaven and who is hell right now. Do you have a sign? For every claim there has to be a proof, right? Do you have a proof for your claim? He's about to say such and such who were present at the masjid, right? When Nabi Rasulullah says, quiet. That's enough, right? Then he says, what do you wish for? He says, I have only one wish. What is that wish? To be able to become shaheed while fighting alongside of you, O Nabi Rasulullah. Look at the perspective. He's seeing the realities, but at the same time, the only wish he has is to gain that status of martyrdom on the side of Nabi Rasulullah. So the topic of tawakkul, constantly seeing ourselves at the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this topic becomes very more you can say important especially when we go through difficulties. Let me just recite a couple of hadith for you by the barakat of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is narrated by Abu Basir from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, in which he says, Inna lillah azza wa jal ibadan fil ard min khalis ibadih ما ينزل من السماء تحفة إلى الأرض إلا صرفها عنهم. Imam al-Sadiq is talking to Abu Basir, and he says, indeed, there are this ibadan fil ard min khalis ibadah. There are this group of servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who are living on planet Earth, and they are among the mukhlasin. They are the one among the sincere one. ما ينزل من السماء تحفة إلى الأرض إلا صرفها عنهم. Nothing gets descended from the sky towards the people of earth, right, as in terms of a bounty, except for the fact that it ditches them. It puts them aside and goes to other people. It does not reach this specific group of people who are among the mukhlasin. إِلَا غَيْرِهِمْ وَلَا بَلِيَّةً إِلَّا صَرَفَهَا إِلَيْهِمْ. And vice versa. Every single baliyah, every single bala that gets descendant upon the people of earth goes and hits the very same sincere people. As if this is the path for those who become sincere, which is why we see in the life of the Ahlul Bayt, right? The more closer we are, the more of this bala and this test and these calamities, it is destined for us. And that's what Amir al-Mu'minin says. It may sound like a bad news, but there is a bounty embedded within it. He says, for whoever claims to be, or be the muhib of me, Ali ibn Abi Talib, make themselves ready to receive the balas. Make themselves ready to receive the calamities from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is that? Let me give you one more thing. إِنَّ اللَّهَ إِذَا أَحَبَّ عَبْدًا غَتَّهُ بِالْبَلَاءِ غَتَّ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes a servant. That's one of the prayers that we always pray, right? Oh Allah, pick us for example. إِنَّ اللَّهَ إِذَا أَحَبَّ عَبْدًا غَتَّهُ بِالْبَلَاءِ غَتَّ. غَتَّهُ means not that you get, for example, you get tested once or you face difficulty once. No. It's when you get drowned by difficulties, to the point that you can barely even raise your voice to say, oh Allah, why, for example. Ghatta means this, right? So ghattatan bil bala'i, ghatta, with the ta'keed, with emphasis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showers them, drowns them with bala and calamities. Wa inna wa iyyakum, when Imam is talking to Sudair Sayrafi, Ya Sudair, lanusbihu bihi wa namsa. We're constantly being drowned with these balas every morning and evenings, right? So look at the reality of Iman. Is embedded, is twisted, it is twined with the topic of bala. So I cannot say if something happened in my life, if I lose a loved one, if I lose something that I was aiming for, if I didn't get something that I worked for, if somebody was unjust to me, right? I cannot say, oh Allah, why everything is happening to me? Why me? I did my prayers, I did my fasting, I went to the majlis of Imam al-Hussein, I went to the 30 days of the month of Ramadan. Why am I not getting what am I asking from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What's the reason? The reason is this. Why Allah is constantly providing balas? Isn't Allah like Arhamur Rahimeen? He's the most merciful. Why is He constantly giving us these balas? What's the wisdom behind the balas? What's the wisdom, or what's the teaching part? They say bala is the fundamental element of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's training and upbringing. Right? Training and upbringing. If you don't want anything in terms of faith or perfection or kamal, there will be no bala. And that's why Allah gives the example of the kuffar, the disbelievers. Look at their lives, and Allah says in the Quran, if it were not for the sake of having equal amount of distribution of goods for those who work towards them, we would have given the disbelievers the houses which their roofs will be made out of gold, the walls which will be made out of silver. Think about that. If it was not for the principle of gaining what you work for, basically, I'm going to translate in layman term, Allah would have given the house made of gold and silver to those who would disbelieve in Him. Yes? Vice versa for the mu'mineen, bala after bala after bala. What kind of a justice is this? Think about that. Why the bala comes? Remember at the beginning of the speech I mentioned this. When it comes to the topic of tawakkul, when do we usually do tawakkul? When we find ourselves cornered. When we find ourselves at the stage of izdirar. Izdirar means you have absolutely no way of running away, no way of resolving the situation. You don't know who to turn to. You don't know what else to do. You become mustar. When you become mustar, you do tawakkul. When the airplane is about to go down, right? When the airplane is about to go down, everybody becomes mutawakkil. Believer or non-believer, everybody tends to believe in something, right? When the airplane goes down, everybody starts to recite something to whatever they believe in at the stage of istirar. So for a mu'min, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants this iman to become something that takes over the entire life of a mu'min, not only one instant, not only at the time of prayer, not only at the time of fasting, not only at the time of a 1 hour of a majlis, but throughout his life. So what does he do? He constantly gives him the bala, as we say. And I mentioned the meaning of bala, right? Bala is when, the essence of something gets revealed. It goes back to the very same roots that we are made of. By bala, Allah shows our true identity. So now we can build upon it. So the tragedy of Ashura, one aspect is the Masa'ib. Within the same aspect, we see, mashallah, the highest status of Jannat and Tajri fi tahtiha al-anhar, even more entering the heaven in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to as Jannati, my own heaven. Not the heavens which the gardens and the rivers, that's for everybody else. No, that exclusive, the VIP heaven, if you want to say. To whom it gets gifted to the very same ashab who go through all of this balas. That's why we say on the night of Ashura, when all of the testing has passed. When you put yourself among the companions, it's pretty hard. Like from the time that the Qadam of Imam al-Hussein breaks up from Hajj from the city of Mecca and aims towards Kufa, mashallah, they're not 70 to 100 people. Some reports, they say close to 2,000 people. They left the city of Mecca alongside of Imam al-Hussein. Different reports in terms of the numbering. When do they start to depart from Imam al-Hussein? The very first stop was when the news of the Shahadat of Muslim ibn Aqil reaches the group of Imam al-Hussein. That's when a lot of people realize, oh, the pathway that we are going is there's no dunya in it. More likely there will be a fight. More likely there will be a battle. More likely there will be suffering. The minute they realize this, groups by groups by groups, they start to depart and leave and abandon the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? It continues more and more and more, all the way to the land of Karbala, every night within the land of Karbala, all the way to the night before Ashura. To what extent? Again, when we look at the maqatal, some of the stuff is very, devastating just to read how the people who were claiming to be the followers of the Ahlul Bayt in that time tend to run away from the Aziz of Fatima. How? They would place cotton, like a piece of cloth, around the horses that they had, around the shoe horses that they had, so when the horse walks, it would not make a sound over sand, right? And they would tie the horses together in groups. In the middle of the night, they would gently leave the tents without making the slightest of noise. To the point that you would see them right there. Within 1 hour, the next hour, nobody's there. This is the stage on the night of Ashura. To the point that sometimes even Sayyida Zainab and Sayyida Kulsum, they raise this question to Imam al-Hussein. That, oh Hussein, people are constantly group by group, they're adding to the side of Omar Assad. Where is our army? Where is our help? Where are our supporters? Where are those loyal supporters? So Imam keeps looking and looking and looking, nobody's joining. Finally, at one instant, Imam says, yes, there comes the help. Who is he pointing out? He's pointing out to two elder men, Habib ibn Mudahir and Muslim, right? To only two persons. Groups by groups and groups. To one side, only two people to the side of Abu Abdullah Hussein. That's the topic of Bala and Tawakkul. When the Tawakkul is there, this esoteric means and tools, the Zahiri aspect, it becomes baseless. It doesn't say whether I be killed or not. It finds a duty, it goes according to that duty. When the tawakkul is not there, when the bala comes, excuses starts to rise. If I don't do this, I will not get my income. If I don't sell that alcohol on my store, I would not get that sales report. One of the common arguments. They say, Sheikh, I'll give you my sales report. If I sell alcohol in my store, I don't use it. I just sell it. I put it on the shelf. People come and buy it. I make sure I won't sell it to the Muslimin, right? I sell it to non-Muslims. I'll show you my sales report. The sales report jumps up by X amount of percentage, 20, 30, 40, 50, 600%. Yes? If I don't sell alcohol, the sales drop by same amount. I want more rizq, right? Justification. We only look at the Zahiri aspect. If alcohol is sold, therefore I gain more dollar amount. I don't look at the reality behind it. Is the very same dollar amount is going to be even beneficial for me? Or the very same dollars I'm earning from a haram income is going to lead either to myself or my family, to my house, or something to get diverted from Sirat al-Mustaqim. That's what we're missing. The topic of tawakkul, especially when the test comes, right? The interview. A lot of times we tend to change our entire, behavior, the way we dress, the way we talk, the way we behave. Why? Because we want to hide the fact that we are Muslims. But why? If we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being the sustainer, being the raziq, right? Why should I go about this, giving into what I assume is going to lead to me getting that, for example, job? Right? Tawakkul when the test comes. So if the examples I given, if you're like, acting the same way I did, so more likely, again, we're on the side of Umar Asad. We're not on the side of Imam al-Hussein. The companion of Abu Abdullah, no. They had that tawakkul. And that's a unique, quality that we can see in all of them. Again, not all of them are extremely learned scholars of their time. Some of them were. Not all of them are the famous companions of the time. Some of them were, right? Some of them were servants. Some of them were great warriors. Some of them were business people. Some of them were just normal, random, ordinary people. Some of them were just, from a different faith. A Christian, right? A Christian. How many days this Christian became a Muslim? I think I mentioned this on the first day. 3 or 4 days. He embraced Islam for 3 or 4 days. How many, wajib salat can he do in 3 or 4 days? 5 daily prayer times 3 or 4 days. How many is that? 20 namaz, right? How many namaz have me and you and I have done? With 20 namaz, he's able to reach the status of shuhada, and not only a shuhada who became martyred on the side of Imam al-Hussein. So again, me and you, we go to the land of Karbala, we go to the ziyarat of shuhada, and we say, may my father and my mother be sacrificed for all of you. What he has done is not the prayer, is that tawakkul, is that reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that attachment on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where it shows itself in where? In the heart of Imam al-Hussein. That's why the test becomes more severe and severe as we get closer and closer and closer to the day of Ashura. So on the night of Ashura, everybody has read the maqatib. Let's go and review it one more time. Imam calls out all of the ashab to his khayma, to his tent, and he starts talking to them. He says that these people have no other reason to be here except to have me, to capture me. All they want is me. They have no business with any single one of you. As your imam, I remove my bay'ah. I remove the allegiance that you have towards me, right? Meaning fiqhi point, you are free. Then Imam even takes the step one more further. He says, do me a favor. Take advantage of the darkness of the night, run away, and do me a favor. Take a hand of one of my family members and take them with you. Put yourself in that situation. Imam is asking you for something. He's not saying that you're free to go or live. He says, no, you are actually to go and do me a favor. Take one of my family member with you as well. What will we do? Well, alhamdulillah, I've done my part. I've came so far. I showed my support. I was loyal enough. I lasted for all of these days. For 2 days we hadn't had water. For 2 days we hadn't had all of this, different things that we need. So Imam is telling us to leave, right? And a lot of them did. Majority did. Furthermore, Imam says to make it even more easier, go ahead and turn off the light. I don't want anybody to feel ashamed of leaving this khayma, of leaving this tent. They put out the candles, the darkness took over the khayma. Once they turned back on the candle, how many people were left? A few people, a group of people. But what a group of people. That's the beauty about them. That's the unique quality about every single one of them. All they saw, all they say, all they were looking up to was Abu Abdullah Hussein. And it's interesting when you look at all of the recitation that they have, the request that they have, none of them ask, for example, for Imam al-Hussein for shafa'ah. None of them ask for, for example, oh, Imam al-Hussein, intercede for me so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive about my sins. No, all they say is literally gets summarized in one word. Oh, Hussein, was I loyal enough to you? This is happening on the night of Ashura. Then Imam, when he has done the finale of test, he reveals the truth and reality. He shows them their final abad in the hereafter. This is where your destination will be. Basically, that barzakhi eye becomes open. Now everybody's giving each other that glad tiding. and saying Mabruk, and everybody's happy about tomorrow, they say at the corner of the khaymah, there is a standing this youth, the remaining of Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam. His age is about 13 or 14. What we know is was not baligh. He's standing there and he's constantly thinking to himself. He's not entering all of these great champions, all of the warriors, all of the adults, because he's a younger boy. He keeps on waiting as if he has a question to ask from Imam al-Hussein, but he keeps on hesitating. So ashab start to leave the khaymah one by one, it becomes less crowded. Imam al-Hussein spots Qasim ibn al-Hasan is standing at the corner. Imam goes to him. The relation between the two is not only uncle to the nephew, but is literally like a father to a son. Why? Because when Qasim was about 2 years old, he loses his father, Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba. So from that time, he was raised and brought by Imam al-Hussein. So not only he would look up to him as an uncle, he would look up to him as a father, and he would look up to him as his Imam. Imam goes to him, smiles at him, says, Qasim, how come I see you puzzling? What's going on in your mind? First he hesitates, but finally he raises the question. He says, oh, Abu Abdullah, you told all of these people their final abad and their destination, their status in heaven. Is there anything within the story that you mentioned for me? First, Imam al-Hussein doesn't respond to him. He thinks for a little bit. Then he looks at Qasim one more time. He says, let me ask you or answer your question with a question of mine. Oh, Qasim, how do you perceive death? A 13 or a 14-year-old? The famous phrase that's been perhaps golden written in the history of mankind. He says, Ahla min al-asal. He hasn't gone through the courses of Islamic studies for many years to be able to prove what he's saying. One, he's not doing ta'aruf, he's not giving slogans, he's not doing marketing, he's not doing advertising. But says, Ahla min al-asal, sweeter than honey. What a perspective he has at that age. You see the tawakkul? All he sees is how he would get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially through the path of becoming shaheed alongside of the Imam of his time. Then Imam again thinks for a second. Then as they say, Imam does the first of the masa'ib on the night of Ashura himself. He says, yes, oh my dear one, you will become shaheed tomorrow too, but through a shahada, through a painful shahada. And I'll give you one more news. Even the little tiny Ali Asghar who's residing on the next door, he will become shaheed tomorrow. The first masa'ib that Imam recites happens on the night of Ashura. On the day of Ashura, when the Bani Hashim start to go to the battlefield, when Ali Akbar goes to the battlefield, when they bring back the body of Ali Akbar, they say Qasim's face became pale. He becomes changed. He cannot stand up anymore. He cannot wait in a corner anymore. He goes to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He wants to ask for a permission to go. Some Maqatil says Imam al-Hussein tells him no the first time he saw him. So Qasim becomes very disappointed because he looks at himself. He's a 13, 14-year-old. He can barely even get on the horse. He's not that tall enough to wear a shield or an armor. He is not strong enough to even carry a sword. Why would Imam give him the permission? Some Maqatil report this. They say he comes back to his khaymah where his mother is. And the mother, when he looks at the sad face on Qasim's face, says, oh my dear Qasim, I know what you want, and I have a solution for you. Qasim turns and says, what is the solution? The mother takes out this piece of leather. Some say this bicep that, it was tied around his bicep, and he gives it to Qasim. He says, take this to your uncle. This is for this day. Qasim takes that letter to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein opens the letter, recognize the handwriting of Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba. The relation between the two brothers, there's no need for description, especially on the last days when Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba was becoming shaheed due to the poison, how the two embraced each other and they were crying and mourning for one another, one for the mazlumiyat for the other and other for the mazlumiyat of the other. All of those memories comes back to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He kisses the litter, he puts it on his eyes, he embraces Qasim. The Maqatil has both start to cry so much until both of them pass out and faint out and fall down on the land of Karbala. After a couple of minutes, they come through the senses one more time. Imam al-Hussein keeps on looking at Qasim ibn al-Hasan, the resemblance of Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba. How can he say yes to him, to the orphan of Imam al-Hasan? Finally, he gives the permission. He goes back to wear his armor. He cannot find an armor who would fit his size. So what they do, they put on this Arabic dashtasha, this Arabic clothing on him, and they put an ammam on his head, and then Hazrat Abbas, according to one report, helps him to get on the horse. They were saying he could barely reach the pedals of the horse as he was riding on the horse. He comes out of the khayma. Here the enemy reports the remaining of the maqtal. Here's the enemy. The enemy would not exaggerate. He says, when this person came out of the khaymagah, as if I was looking at the moon, at the full moon on top of a horse. He was so beautiful that just by looking at him, I would become speechless. I didn't know what to write about him. So I said, Kharaj al-Ghulam, this youth, this young man exited the khayma whose face was shining like a full moon. And I remember specifically that he had forgotten to tie the laces of his shoes, and specifically it was his left shoes. That shows how great of an eye catcher was Qasim ibn al-Hasan on the horse on the day of Ashura. He comes out and he enters the battlefield. He starts fighting one by one. The Azraq Shami, who's a famous champion of the other side, he has come to the battlefield with 4 of his children. He looks at Qasim. He says, wow, this is a nice catch. I will make sure I'll give the death of him to his mother. He calls out his youngest son. He says, go and kill him. The youngest son goes. Qasim ibn al-Hasan strikes him with one strike, sends him to hell. He gets upset, he sends his second son. The second son goes, Qasim sends him to hell. The third son, the fourth son, Qasim ibn al-Hasan keeps on killing one by one. The shout of Allahu Akbar keeps on going to the sky. Azraq Shami becomes angry. Now he gets on the ground. He starts charging against the Qasim ibn al-Hasan. Imam al-Hussein is looking desperately at Qasim. All of a sudden this walwala, this hell starts to rise to the sky. Again the shout of takbir of Allahu Akbar by Qasim ibn al-Hasan. They see Azraq Shami laying on the ground. This time Umar Asad gets upset. He says, he is the son of Hasan al-Mujtaba. Don't you know you cannot beat these guys one by one? Attack him in groups. So now they start surrounding Qasim ibn al-Hasan from every corner, but not only by swords and spears, but they start throwing rocks and stones at him. He's not wearing any shield. He's not wearing any armor. All of the stones and rocks are getting thrown at him from multiple dimensions. He's only able to block some of them. One of those Najib gets close from the behind and strikes over the head of Qasim ibn al-Hasan as hard as he can. Qasim falls down from the horse and shouts out, Wa Amma! Oh uncle, they say Imam al-Hussein charged against the enemies like a falcon, killing one by one like a fearsome lion. As he pushes back the enemies, all of a sudden this dust goes up to the sky. As they're fighting, when the dust settles down, the reporter says this description: I saw Hussein ibn Ali standing up next to the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan, and he's looking at the body of Qasim laying down on the plain of Karbala, and he's constantly thinking as if he wants to say something to Qasim ibn al-Hasan. He's saying, "Oh Qasim, how difficult it is for your uncle to call out his name, but he would not be able to provide what you have asked for. Oh Qasim, how difficult it is for me to ask something from me and I would not be able to give it to you. Oh my Qasim, be patient and be patient." Then Imam wants to reach and take off the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan. Here Marhum Ja'far al-Shushtari has a beautiful recitation. He says, when Imam al-Hussein takes up the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan, as he embraces the body of Qasim, as he's about to go back towards the Khaymegah, they said the feet of Qasim were laying and getting rubbed over the plains and the sands of Karbala. He says two possibilities. Either Imam al-Hussein had become so devastating, tired and heartbroken from the martyrdom of Qasim ibn al-Hasan that he could not stand up straight, or number two, which is more likely, is the fact that the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan was trampled under all of the horses and the soldiers of enemies so much that the length of the body has become more longer for his feet to drag on the plains of Karbala. Imam al-Hussein takes the body back to the Khaymah of Shuhada. He lays the body next to the body of Ali Akbar. He puts his right hand on the body of Ali Akbar, the left hand around the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan. He looks up at the door, the Sayyida Zainab is standing there. He looks at the sky, says, "Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un." وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. One more time. السلام على وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم إلهي بحق محمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين وتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين يا الله. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من خير عوانك وأنصارك وشيعتك. Oh Allah will ask you on the right of Imam al-Hussein and the right of Qasim ibn al-Hasan to hasten the appearance of Imam of time and to write our name among his true companions. Oh Allah will ask you for forgiveness upon all of us and to provide cure upon all of the sick ones and to provide mercy and rahmah upon all of the marhumin and marhumat. Oh Allah will ask you to answer the hawaij of mu'mineen and mu'minat and to give us the tawfiq of the ziyarat of the Ahlul Bayt in this dunya and their shafa'ah in the hereafter. Oh Allah will ask you to accept this majalis on your mercy and grace, and to extend the sawab of this majalis to the souls of ulama, maraji, and marhumin and marhumat. Oh Allah will ask you to put our name among the true commemorers and mourners of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Oh Allah will ask you humbly to provide shifa to all of the sick ones. Especially there were some requests among the community members. So let's take a moment, let's clear our intention, and let's recite the holy verse of Ammal Yajib 5 times together. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات.